As the Black Lives Matter movement has continued, so have the calls to educate oneself about the movement. And I agree. In order to understand a cause, why it exists, and especially how I can help, I must be informed. Now, typically, when you're learning something, I believe it can be helpful to seek someone out who is experienced in what I am trying to learn, like a friend or an associate. However, in this instance, that might not be the best option. If someone willingly shares their experience, you should absolutely listen. But solely relying on that person to educate you on the trauma that they live with daily is cruel, especially when you can start to do so yourself with a simple Google search. I certainly feel sometimes that I'm not sure of where I should start educating myself and how I can be the most effective. If you're feeling a similar way, let's figure that out together in this video. I'd like to clarify, however, that this video is not a video about educating you on the Black Lives Matter movement. If you're looking to educate yourself in this particular area, I provided one link at the top of this description that I found is a helpful place to start. But for those of you interested in hearing what else I have to say, let's talk about the importance of educating yourself and why I believe we're never finished learning. Hi, my name is Ben Hillman, and this is some Slacker stuff. I'm on a mission to eliminate overthinking. If you're new here, welcome. But if you're coming back and you've subscribed, then you deserve this. But don't tell the people that haven't subscribed, it'll make them feel bad. But if you want this and you aren't subscribed, you can subscribe and you can get it. Quick hack. When it comes to traditional schooling, I used to think that school was a place where a teacher was supposed to put information into my brain like a computer. All I had to do was show up and I could just download all the necessary facts. I've since realized how ludicrous that is, and I think that my false understanding is part of why I dislike school so much in the first place. Why should I sit here and listen to things that I have no interest in? What I didn't realize is that being educated isn't always about learning what you're interested in. It's about learning skills that can be helpful to yourself, as well as helpful to others. It's about striving to be better, even when it's hard. School wasn't necessarily the place where I received information, it was where I learned the tools to find the information myself. Of course, absolutely were resources provided, and the teachers were there to help me find my way. But it wasn't supposed to be an environment where I downloaded all of the necessary information straight to my metaphorical motherboard. Essentially what I'm saying is that relying on others to feed you information isn't effective, because working to find answers yourself is much more impactful. You are responsible for educating yourself too, because we are never done learning. I used to think that once I was finished with school, that I wouldn't have to learn anymore. I'd be completely finished. They did give me a fancy piece of paper after all. I've since learned as we grow, the world we understand today becomes different than it was yesterday. And I know that this seems really exhausting, overwhelming even. How can I truly educate myself if the subject matter is always changing? Well, the answer to that question is that educating yourself has to be a part of your life always. I mean, the alternative is to not be aware of your surroundings. If you aren't aware of your surroundings, you could hurt yourself or others. This sounds a little bit hokey, but I believe that each person represents the potential to change the world, and the more that you know about the world, the more good you can enact. This is one of the reasons that I've seen why educating yourself is so important to a movement like Black Lives Matter. The number of areas that could use your help might seem like they're overwhelming at first, but honestly, the more you learn, the more you understand where you can be most effective. If you're finding this video helpful so far, I invite you to press the like button below. Every little bit helps my channel grow. Hey, that rhymed. I just noticed that right now, like while I was filming this. So when I was 10 years old, my cousin that was 2 years older than me wanted to get into snowboarding. Of course, wanting to be like my cooler, older relative, I decided I'd convert over from skiing, which I had already learned a couple years prior. With my history of skiing, I assumed that snowboarding would be exactly the same, but just a little bit different. If only I could warn myself of all the bruises I would endure. Each time I found my balance, I'd fall straight onto my ass, but I still persisted. Over a few days, I noticed a lot of falling and not huge swaths of progress. It was definitely discouraging at first, but I eventually found the joy. The failures would continue to happen, but there started to be broader gaps in between incidents. And with each fall, I learned something new. Honestly, the beautiful thing about it is that falling is a core part of snowboarding. You kind of have to fall on your ass just to adjust your straps or put the board on itself. I've since reached a level of comfort with snowboarding where I don't fear this failure consistently. I'm aware of it, and if stating so doesn't convince you, I've got 2 broken bones to prove it. But I don't let that fear of failure control me. Each of those moments teaches me a lesson, whether it's about going too fast, putting others in danger, or avoiding injury. Let's take a step back. All learning does not include risk of breaking a limb or severe brain trauma. The lesson this has taught me, however, is that learning is filled with mistakes, and that's okay. I make mistakes when I educate myself on video editing techniques. I also make mistakes when I educate myself on BLM. It's scary too to think that mistakes might mean I am learning the wrong way and that I might communicate the wrong message to other people. It's also scary to think that my mistakes could harm other people. With snowboarding, if I'm trying to learn my limits with how fast or fancy I get with carving, sure, I might bump into someone and potentially cause them harm. The notion that this is true in other areas of learning is frightening. I don't want my education to be at the expense of the livelihood of other people. I think what it comes down to, though, is that I have to accept that these mistakes are a part of my learning. Of course, my intention is not to misspeak or spread the wrong information, but the truth is, intentions are not always fully realized. The responsibility I have is to accept when my previous notions are challenged. Now, being challenged does not necessarily mean that my entire belief system is flawed, but it can help reveal faults that I may not be aware of. If I realize I made a mistake, then I do have an opportunity to correct that mistake and let it influence my actions moving forward. But dwelling on the mistakes I've made without producing any tangible deeds moving forward does a disservice to those people that I've wronged. So what are some mistakes that you've learned from? This, of course, is going to vary from a scale of seriousness and scope, but let me know in the comments below how that helped you better understand the concept. So, how do we start? Well, this is of course going to depend on what you're trying to educate yourself on. If it's a skill like snowboarding, then you need elevation, precipitation, and determination. If it's a cause like Black Lives Matter, you need awareness, time, and humility. Sorry, those didn't rhyme as well. I mentioned mistakes in the previous section, but you don't need to wait for mistakes to happen in order to learn. Just start. I know, it's frustrating to hear that my answer to how do I start is to just start, but you have to try and eliminate some of that overthinking here. Don't really worry about the how, just pick somewhere and try it out. You can always change later. Remember that what works for other people might not be what works for you. For many folks, reading books is a great place to comprehend information, but it doesn't really work out that well for me. It takes me a long time to read and the information just doesn't always stick. That was 1 page? Fortunately, I have found a great alternative in audiobooks and podcasts. It's great for listening while I'm working out or walking to work. I just finished reading Eloquent Rage, A Black Feminist Discovers Her Superpower by Brittany Cooper. And I also recommend the podcast 1619 produced by the New York Times. Both were really informative to me, but don't take my word for it, check them out for yourself. There are plenty of other formats that you can try too, like movies, TV shows, songs, magazines, articles, you name it. Don't let yourself be overwhelmed with which resource is the right one. Just pick one and go. Of course, it may not be the best book or the best movie, but if you start discussing it with others, it'll allow you for the ideas that you've learned to be fully realized. Of course, it can be uncomfortable when your understanding of a concept is challenged, but like we talked about, this is when some of the best learning takes place. The subject matter itself may be uncomfortable as well, but remember that educating yourself is a privilege. For some folks, learning about these subjects is not a choice. It's a reality that they live with every single day. So, normally this is where I would promote my Patreon, and if you want to find it, you can. Instead, if you have the means, please go to this link and donate to one of the several funds that I have listed. Start somewhere. It's going to be tough. It's not always going to be enjoyable, but it's essential to educate yourself so that an equitable future is possible for all of us. Occasionally, I feel like educating myself gets in the way of action I feel like I should be taking. I tend to worry that there is a protest I should attend, somewhere I can volunteer, or a place that desperately needs my donation. But in order to figure out where I should direct my energy, I need to learn more about the issues. A huge part of educating yourself, perhaps the most important part of educating yourself, is that it's about inspiring action. If you're unsure of where you should act, allow further education to guide that, and then act. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, if you're looking for a place to start learning more about BLM, I'll remind you that there is a link at the top of my description box you can follow. And with that, I'll be here next time. Trauma that they live with daily, were never use. Why is my brain breaking? Place to comprehend information.